institute process, or the set of materials that Baha'is use as a tool to contribute to building community by, incorporating conversations around trying to see how we can apply the Baha'i writings alongside people who don't necessarily view themselves as Baha'is, but are interested in this effort, like trying to build community and both considering, our material reality and also our spiritual reality. I think that this process in Brooklyn has allowed people to not only build friendships with people who are different from themselves, specifically because Brooklyn is a very gentrified community, so you have a population that's been there much longer, and then you have a population, and many of the Baha'is are part of this group, who are just moving into the community. I think that the institute process has actually allowed there to be a bridge between these two communities and friendships that can actually develop at the intersection. Also, it's done it in a way that people are having meaningful conversations and not just, oh, hi, like, it's really nice out today, which I think that, like, in our culture, in our society now, that's not uncommon. Like, we want to connect, but we don't necessarily know how to go deeper. If you're in a community with people of diverse backgrounds, you don't know where to begin. You don't want to offend them. You might have some weird emotions and feelings or ideas that you've had about this community that you're living with because of our upbringing. In terms of the wider scheme of how the institute process plays into ameliorating racism, I think it's like the space that a lot of us will have conversations that are necessary for us to address the attitudes. Similar to ISGP, trying to actually understand what race unity means, what does justice look like, what are modes that we can get there. I remember I read some research that was talking about how these conversations around race are most effective in terms of like helping people deepen their understanding or hearing another person's perspective when they happen among friends. And I think that since the institute process is expected to be held on friendships and like carried out through friendships, we have a better chance at understanding and practicing empathy and thinking of like creative ways to address some of the material realities of racism and trying to correct those over time, because the institute process allows us to actually become friends with each other before we have some of these harder conversations, rather than it being just like a debate online with a stranger. The conversation's happening with someone you know. With a junior youth group that I've helped with in Brooklyn, when we were thinking about service, one of the things that came up that I view as tied to racism is community safety. So the suggestion was that we try to do some sort of service project around enhancing community safety. And one of my reflections when I learned that this is what the youth wanted to think about was how a lot of times these issues are isolated. So people are thinking my community is unsafe because the people around me are violent or they don't care about one another. And it's not necessarily situated in the grander scheme of things, the history of trauma, also the way that communities are isolated from resources, and also isolated from some of the like basic privileges that folks of other communities have, specifically because this is a housing project. So there's a lot of isolation that happens in terms of an othering that happens with these youth's home. And I was just thinking about like our education system and how can we as a people educate our younger participants to understand that these issues at a wider and a more contextual level, so that they don't create negative perceptions of themselves or negative perceptions of their neighbors, and actually are able to like view everyone with the dignity that they deserve. Even in that conversation where it came up, this idea of like enhancing community safety, this with a group that's mostly Black junior youth, no one's thinking about that this need for community safety is because of racism. Again, this is like the kinds of conversation we have to explicitly have so that like it's not gone under the radar, and that we can understand better the root of our problems as we address them, rather than just trying to like address them with no understanding. Without progress in this, we will not have progress in the way that we want to have progress as a community. So it's like a huge breath of fresh air when I hear someone talk about like, also let's think about race. What about people who aren't here in this room? Just how can we make this space more inclusive? And thinking about those things has been, I always feel like it's like a relief.